This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. A cattle market update with Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel kicks off today's show. He explains how drought is impacting wheat grazing options and feeder cattle imports. This week is National 4-H Week, and Sarah Maass and Amy Collins joins today's show to discuss 4-H in Kansas and how Kansas is celebrating National 4-H Week. Ending the show is K-State Extension cow-calf specialist Jason Warner as he says what cattle producers need to remember if they choose to graze their cattle on grain sorghum residue. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Monday show with a cattle market update with Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel. Derrell, thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Great to be here.
Derrell, what are we seeing for cash cattle market?
You know, cash cattle markets are generally still kind of in recovery mode. We had that big correction, I guess you can call it, in August that was related to the stock market and all of that. Futures markets took a big hit and pulled the cash markets down with them, but they're all in kind of in recovery mode. So in Oklahoma auction prices, both the lightweight calves and the feeder cattle are going up the last couple of weeks. And for the calves in particular, that's a little bit counter seasonal. Typically, the calves are moving towards a seasonal low in late October, early November. And maybe all the more so because we don't really have a lot of good stocker demand. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit. But the bottom line is, because we have gotten pulled down so far, I think we're going to see these prices probably continue to strengthen a little bit into the fourth quarter. And, we may see, if not the highest prices of the year, we have pretty good spring highs for those calves. But we're going to get back up, I think, in that neighborhood again before the end of the year, probably.
What are we seeing for futures?
Futures markets have also, again, they spent a lot of time at the bottom kind of trying to find some support. They've really had a pretty good run the last week or two. They've really come back up, kind of broken out of that bottom pattern that they were in. And so, again, I think they're poised to kind of go back to, go back to the underlying fundamental strength based on the numbers that we're seeing. And so, it's all summer. It's been kind of a case of the funds versus the fundamentals. And the funds kind of had their way for a while with the external factors and so on. And now I think the fundamentals are reasserting themselves a little bit in both cash and futures.
Derrell also wanted to cover what we're seeing for box beef.
The last week or two, box beef's been kind of sideways moving. Now, we dropped from highs about 6 weeks or so ago. And we got a little concerned about weaker demand, but it really kind of found a bottom. Choice box beef has been bouncing around right around that $3 or $300 a hundredweight mark, $3 a pound mark. And so, I think it's still fundamentally pretty strong. We're probably transitioning kind of from a grilling based demand, sort of a summer demand into a fall and winter demand. So we'll see some shifts in some of the products as we go into the winter. We'll put a little more emphasis on some of the middle meats as, restaurant traffic has probably been one of the weaker parts of beef demand this summer, but it should pick up a little bit as we get into cooler weather. And so, I think beef demand is still fundamentally pretty strong, but just, kind of moving sideways in terms of the prices for boxed beef.
So when we look in the short term for the cattle market, things are looking pretty positive?
I think so. I think, the fundamentals longer term are still very positive. And I think they're, we've had a situation where we've had some volatility and some short-term weakness. I think we're moving past that round. Now, one of the lessons here is that, at the levels that we're at, which we're not very far away from record high prices in pretty much any category you want to look at, whether it's feeder cattle or fed cattle or whatever. So you're pretty vulnerable to any kind of shock that's out there. And I think that's one of the lessons is that we have to be prepared for volatility. We may have a bullish outlook, which in general probably means that things are going to go up. But along the way, we can have lots of bumps. And, if you have to those are going to hit, or they could hit during some of your marketing windows, and you really have to kind of manage that. So there's kind of a side message here, and that is that risk management is still important, even though we have a pretty bullish outlook on the market.
As we're thinking about the market, also wanting to think about how drought could impact the market in the future.
Yeah, drought is reasserting itself, and I say unfortunately, the meteorologists have been telling us for about a year that we would transition over the summer back into La Nina conditions. I think we're there, and it's playing out pretty much as expected. They've been saying this for several months now, that we would get into, at least in the southern part of the U.S., into a warmer, drier pattern. We're locked into an extremely dry pattern right now in the southern plains. So that, now we had a pretty good year by and large in 2024, and even 2023 pastures were not too bad. We made a lot of hay in those 2 years, and at least in Oklahoma, we're carrying over a lot of hay supplies. Now, I don't think the drought ever gave us as much of a break up in Kansas, so probably not quite as good of conditions there, where the drought never really did go away very much. But for this time of the year, we're not expecting to grow a lot of forage. So, drought on the one hand is not as much of a concern through the winter as it might be, with one exception, and that's water supplies. And so if you look at a lot of these stock ponds around, they're low. They're not critically low yet, but we typically don't replenish stock ponds during the wintertime. So I think that's going to be a source of concern for producers as we go into the winter.
Maybe a little bit of concern also for people who are doing dual purpose wheat.
Yeah, absolutely. We count on getting that wheat planted early if you want to do grazing for the winter wheat. And we've not been able to get much wheat. In some cases, we're waiting to plant for some moisture. In some cases, we've planted dry and we're waiting for moisture to hopefully bring it up. And there is some wheat that's up, at least around that I see around. But it's not growing very fast, and it's going to have moisture, very soon to continue making progress. So I think all in all, our window for at least certainly for optimal kinds of winter wheat grazing is passing. We'll probably still get some wheat pasture if we get some moisture here at some point, but it's going to be delayed, and it may be a pretty short grazing season this year. And
Derrell, we're not the only ones seeing some impacts of drought.
No, the drought has been an issue, particularly down in Mexico this year. And one of the things that we've noted this year is that we've had an increase in cattle imports from Mexico. They're up about 25%, just a little over 25% for the first 7 months of the year. And what's even more interesting when you look at those numbers is that the number of steers coming in is actually only up about 3%, but the number of heifers compared to heifers in the mix a year ago is more than double this year. And so the heifers are currently making up about 35% of the total imports. Long-term average is about 19%. So you sort of ask the question, why are we getting so many heifers? It's very unusual to get this many heifers. And I think it's a combination of probably the fact that we do have high prices in the U.S. that's attractive for anybody that has the ability to export into the U.S., but the other part of it is this drought, and the drought conditions that they've had in Mexico is probably encouraging them to move some cattle, maybe that they really wouldn't like to or wouldn't otherwise. But the drought's an issue there as well.
Is there any concern with us importing that many more heifers?
Well, and I should point out that imported heifers from Mexico are all spayed. So these are coming in as feeder cattle. They're going to, they may go out on grazing for a while and then go into the feedlot. We're not talking about breeding animals here that are coming in, so it's not that. But the fact that we are getting so many more heifers this year compared to a year ago, it's about 150,000 head more. So it's not a huge number. But when we look at the fact that we've been watching feedlot inventories of heifers and heifer slaughter rates, the fact that we're getting more heifers from Mexico would be a little part of the explanation for that maybe that's keeping that heifer number in the feedlot a little higher. It's not the explanation. I mean, it's not the overall explanation for it. I don't think it changes the fact that, we're still interpreting the heifers on feed and the heifer slaughter to tell us that we're probably not retaining heifers very much in the U.S. But the increase in heifers from Mexico would moderate that just slightly when you take it into account.
And because of the prices we're currently seeing, are we seeing more imports from other countries, specifically looking at Canada?
Yeah, on the Canadian side, imports are up as well. They're up about 22% year over year. Most of the cattle coming in from Canada, most of the increase this year is actually slaughter cattle. So that's cattle coming in, going straight to packing plants, coming out of Canadian feedlots. So we're not really getting that many more feeder cattle from Canada, but the fed cattle imports, and again, that's part of the reason, perhaps it's a fairly modest part of it, but it's a little piece of why we have not seen fed slaughter in the U.S. drop as much as we earlier thought. A little bit of that could be explained by the fact that we're getting more fed cattle from Canada.
Derrell, as we round out today's conversation then, how is your overall summary of the cattle market?
The market is still based on, tightening numbers. We think that the cow herd continues to get smaller in 2024, that we're going to go into 2025 with even less beef cows and with prospects for an even smaller calf crop next year. The big question everybody's asking is, when do we start retaining heifers and trying to rebuild? And we don't see any indication of it yet. We might get some here at the end of the year. But in any event, it means that nothing's going to change anytime soon, and we're going to continue to see a tight supply situation that will continue to support cattle prices at an elevated level, not only for the rest of 2024, but through 2025 and beyond at this point.
Derrell, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
You bet. Happy to be here.
That was Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our Monday show talking about National 4-H Week with State 4-H Program Leader Sarah Maass and a Program Coordinator with Kansas 4-H, Amy Collins. Sarah, Amy, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Sarah, first, can you just tell us, what is 4-H?
4-H is a wonderful youth development organization that we really focus on positive youth development, encouraging youth to find their spark, give them an opportunity to belong to another organization. And it's for youth ages 7 to 19, but we also have the opportunity for clover buds. So 5 and 6-year-olds can also join as a clover bud. It's non-competitive, but it's still fun with friends and family.
And 4-H has been around for a long time. And in case anyone's forgotten, what are the 4-H's?
Well, the first 4-H is head, then heart, hands, and health.
And why is this something that a listener might want to get their youth involved in?
Well, we've always heard past 4-H members talk about how 4-H improved their public speaking skills. And that has been something that we've heard for years. So let's fast forward to today's world. We just got done having the career day here at K-State, and one of the companies that was there interviewing kids explained to me that this year in particular was a very fast turnaround. They spoke with kids at the career fair. That evening, they had to make the decision on who they would interview, and the interviews took place the very next day. So that's a pretty fast turnaround, which meant those kids had to speak positively about themselves to these employers, and those employers had to make decisions within the first 30 seconds to a minute as to whether or not that kid would get an interview. So public speaking is now more about self-advocacy and how you can promote yourself to a future employer.
And 4-H offers the opportunity for youth to be able to learn more about themselves in a safe place and build that self-esteem and receive positive feedback in various settings to where they will go off and be productive citizens and be able to advocate for themselves and sell themselves in a good way to future employers.
And this year, we're seeing a little bit of a shift for the national focus of kind of the slogan that goes along with 4-H.
Yes, Beyond Ready. Beyond Ready is something that you're going to start to hear more and more about in the coming months and years. As we think about 4-H youth development, we are all about providing those tools for youth to be able to be those productive citizens as they grow up to be adults. But what we're finding is that 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030, so just 6 years from now, haven't even been invented yet. And so as we think about youth need us more today than ever because of that. And what are those skills that we can give our youth through 4-H project work and working with others and building those partnerships that will help them with those jobs that they're going to be applying for that we don't even have any idea about at this point.
And when it comes to helping youth, you guys aren't the only ones. There's a lot of volunteers that also help make Kansas 4-H operate.
It's what our program is based on, are those volunteers who have the knowledge to help our youth in and around the state of Kansas.
So while Kansas 4-H focused towards 7 and 19-year-olds, also push for adults to maybe get involved in 4-H?
Absolutely. When we think about 4-H over 100 years ago, the land-grant university was finding that the way to reach the agriculture producers and the homemakers with all of the research-based information was to go through the youth, because then the parents would see the youth practicing those things and be like, oh, wow, like, what are you doing? And that's how they got the information to the adults. And so when we think about now, we are relying on our adults to help administer the program and share their expertise, because our parents and the volunteers are way more educated than what they were a century ago. And so we have thousands of volunteers across the state. Being the land-grant institution, we have extension offices in all 105 counties. That means we have 4-H in all 105 counties. And it's just a really great opportunity for someone to share their wealth and knowledge with others.
So as we're thinking about 4-H being in all 105 counties, they're not just focused towards the youth who are involved in 4-H, but also getting out in those counties and sharing their knowledge with other youth that are just wanting to learn.
Absolutely. We've got all of our extension agents. They focus on not only 4-H youth development, but we have ag and natural resources. We have family and consumer sciences, family and community wellness agents, and community vitality. And all of those agents do some sort of youth development programming. It could be in the schools. It could be within their community. It could be at daycare centers. It could be anywhere within their community. And so when we think about the 4-H youth development program and youth development, as we think of extension, anything done in the name of youth development is 4-H.
Really today also focusing on National 4-H Week, not something just for Kansas.
Yes, National 4-H Week. It is obviously a national celebration, and it happens the first full week of October, Sunday through Saturday. And every state puts a little different spin on it. And Kansas, we have themes for every day of the week this week. So I'll let Amy talk about those specific themes.
Okay, so with each day we have a different theme. Monday is Monday Motivation. How do you make the best better? Tuesday is Trivia Tuesday. Did you know? Tell us something we don't know, a fun fact you learned in 4-H. Wednesday, 4-H Spirit Day. We want everyone to wear the clover with pride. Thursday is Throwback Thursday. Throw it back old school. Send us some pictures of then and now. And Friday, Friday Night Lights, Spotlight a 4-H alum. This is where you can get out some of those good oldie pictures. Saturday is Saturday Service, which leads us into our 48 hours of 4-H. How do you serve your community?
And for 48 hours of 4-H, doing some fun things at Rock Springs, Sarah?
We are. So we have the opportunity at Rock Springs to be able to kind of help pay it forward there. We are going to have teams that will come and help with garden. They're going to be called the Garden Crew. And they're going to, we're going to join Rock Springs, the Rock Springs team, in beautifying the gardens around Rock Springs. And we'll start at Johnson and go to other gardens around the property. Another team is going to be the housekeeping crew. This crew is going to assist the housekeeping team in helping deep clean several buildings and meeting spaces as we think about closing some of those up for the winter, but also getting ready for those fall and winter programs. And then finally, we're going to have a barn crew, and this team's going to help revamp the lower concrete portion of the barn, which is over there, the horse barn, giving the facility a fresh and new appearance. And they're also going to help and clean and winterize the tack and organize the riding helmets and all those fun things. But this is a statewide opportunity at Rock Springs. But the great thing is 4-H clubs can do their own service project. And the 48 Hours of 4-H campaign was put together, I think it's been well over 10 years ago now. But the goal is how many Kansans, whether they're 4-H members, parents, volunteers, 4-H alum, can we get to do service that weekend all across Kansas?
And we know 4-H usually is a lot of times associated with agriculture, which is really important to us here at Agriculture Today. But there are projects and other activities that, for people who maybe agriculture is not their cup of tea, things for them to be involved in.
Absolutely. We have 7 categories that our projects fall under. Animal science is one of those. Communication and expressive arts, consumer and family sciences, natural resources, leadership and personal development, plant sciences, and engineering and technology. And really the great thing in the big picture to me with all of the projects, they're very interdisciplinary. And so there's a lot of engineering and technology projects that they just jump over into agriculture, whether it's the natural resource side, whether it's the plant science side, or the animal science side. And so that is one of the great things I think 4-H is all about, helping those youth be that beyond ready, because they're able to dabble in a bunch of different things to find that spark and their passion for a future career.
For people who are interested in checking out 4-H, what's your first recommendation they do?
I think they should go to our website, which is kansas4h.org, or catch us on Facebook, which is Kansas 4-H.
Contact your local extension office, and on that website, you're going to be able to find that local extension office and get in contact with one of the extension agents and find a local club that's a good fit for your family.
Sarah, Amy, I appreciate you both taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was State 4-H Program Leader Sarah Maass, and she was joined by a Program Coordinator with Kansas 4-H, Amy Collins, as we discussed National 4-H Week and 48 Hours of 4-H. I'd just like to remind you of what the days are, as this is National 4-H Week. Monday is Monday Motivation. Tuesday is Trivia Tuesday. Wednesday is 4-H Spirit, where they ask that you wear the 4-H clover. Thursday is Throwback Thursday. Friday is Friday Night Lights. And Saturday, the 12th, is Saturday Service as they kick off 48 Hours of 4-H. You can find out more information about 4-H and these days by going online to kansas4h.org. That is kansas4-h.org. Or you can check out Kansas 4-H on Facebook. I will link all these in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Monday show hearing from K-State Cow-Calf Extension Specialist Jason Warner as he discusses cattle grazing grain sorghum residue.
Well, as we move into the fall season, this is certainly a very busy time of the year for everyone involved in production agriculture, but certainly for those that are going to be working through fall harvest and getting ready to turn their cattle out onto crop residues following harvest. And today I'd like to visit with you a little bit about just some important considerations that we want to keep in mind for grazing grain sorghum residue following harvest. Number one, the amount of residue in terms of quantity and the quality of that residue that we have available is going to be the highest and the best that it is at that time immediately following harvest. And so as we progress through the grazing season and on into later fall and winter months, the quantity and the quality of that residue will decrease over time due to trampling, losses, wind losses, and certainly by consumption by the cattle themselves. So unlike our typical pastures where we have regrowth, active regrowth throughout the season, the amount of residue in terms of both quantity and quality over time will decrease throughout that time period. The other thing that we want to remember is that cattle are selective grazers. And so we know that they will selectively graze the most palatable parts of the residue that are available to them when we turn them into a crop residue field immediately following harvest. And so as a result, they're going to consume those higher quality plant parts first, and they'll leave the less palatable and the less nutritious parts. So those parts will be available as we progress later on into the grazing season. And that's another reason why our quality overall will decrease as we progress throughout the grazing season. Now, one thing that's different with grain sorghum as compared to corn residue following harvest is that when we harvest grain sorghum, we will usually come in and we'll just harvest the head of that plant, and we'll leave the remaining portion of the stalk and of the plant that will not go through the combine during that time period. And so as a result, when we come in and we just remove the head from that plant, the rest of that remaining material, the rest of the leaf and the stalk material will remain intact and will be left standing after harvest. And so that actually is a very nice advantage from the standpoint of the leaves are still going to be attached to the stalk or the stem, and there's generally speaking less wind loss with that residue following that harvest. The other thing that we want to keep in mind when we think about plant quality and nutrient quality of that residue is we certainly see a lot of variation when we think about the leaf material or the stem material. And most of the data that's been collected here at K-State would suggest that from a crude protein standpoint, we'll see the leaf material will be anywhere from 6 to maybe 8% crude protein, and the stalk or the stem maybe as low as 4.5 to maybe up to 6% crude protein on a dry matter basis. And so in general, when we look at the entire plant, we're usually going to be seeing crude protein levels anywhere from 6 on up to maybe as high as 7.5 or 8% crude protein. Again, a lot of that depending on certain agronomic factors that we're going to see with the field itself. Now, one thing that we want to keep in mind when we think about grazing crop residues is that from a stocking rate standpoint, most of the data that's been collected over the course of time here at K-State Research and Extension would suggest that there's enough residue out there on a dry matter basis to support one non-lactating cow for approximately 50 to 60 days per acre. So one non-lactating cow for 50 to 60 days per acre, there's enough residue out there on a dry matter basis to supply that. And again, there is some indication that would vary some depending on grain yield. One other thing that we always want to keep in mind, as with any crop residue, but particularly with grain sorghum, if there's an issue with lodging in the field or we're concerned about a lot of down grain that's in the field that we were unable to pick up through the combine and harvest and it's still laying out there in the field, certainly when we get up above 10, 15, certainly up above 20 bushels to the acre of grain that's out there on the field, that's when we certainly want to use caution to minimize or reduce the risk of acidosis or founder. And so, certainly when we're in those situations where we've got that much grain drop down there on the surface of the field, we certainly want to be thinking about doing things like strip grazing or providing sodium bicarbonate, filling those cattle up with low-risk forage, high-quality forage prior to turning them out, those types of things as well, too.
Once again, that was K-State Cow-Calf Extension Specialist Jason Warner. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you on Tuesday.